What's going on, guys? John Stargarian here, and I want to talk briefly about my play on Jeremy Stephens against Calvin Kattar. I played Stephens for a unit at plus 215, and I may increase my exposure to him there because I like him quite a bit, and I think this is serious value. So, first of all, let's jump into Stephens first. Stephens, he's got a lot of losses, but if you actually look at his career, he's also got a ton of quality wins, and really, there's two type of guys that really beat him consistently. And those guys are guys that can wrestle him to death and just over and over attempt takedowns because he's not a great defensive wrestler and his get-ups aren't great. And then guys who are really quick and can hang on the outside and just basically play the stick and move game with him. He struggles with that a lot because his striking is pretty slow and he likes to load up on his shots looking for knockouts. But other than those guys, he's actually done a pretty good job. His volume numbers aren't the most impressive in the world. Like, for instance, he only lands 3.09 significant strikes for 15 minutes. But his defensive numbers are pretty strong. He only absorbs 2.98 significant strikes. And if you actually, the volume initially before I jumped into the tape and jumped into the numbers a little deeper was a bit of a concern for me because Kattar lands at a very high rate of 5.12 significant strikes per 15. But then you jump into Stephens' career a bit, and something you'll notice is, while his volume numbers overall are low, he very rarely gets that volume badly, and he's shown the ability on multiple occasions to up his volume and keep a high pace when the fight's fought at a high pace. And so I am not really overly concerned about him getting badly out-volumed by Kattar here. And in fact, his striking ratio is actually considerably better than Kattar's at plus 0.19 versus Kattar's minus 1.23. So first of all, I don't think Kattar fits the mold of, his ratio is better, and I don't think Kattar fits the mold of the kind of guy that, typically beats Stephens. Now, first of all, I think we can basically assume that Kattar's not going to wrestle him to death. Allegedly he comes from a wrestling background, but he attempts 1.5 takedowns for 15 minutes, and we've seen nothing to make me think that he's high level enough that even if he tried to, take that game plan, he'd be able to implement it successfully. On the other side of the coin, I do think he's got the skill set to stick and move on the outside and is fast enough to just give Stephens issues there and ride that out for 15 minutes. I just don't think it's a reliable outcome, to be honest with you, because Kattar's never really fought like that. If you look at his entire career, Kattar likes to walk forward into the pocket and box you up in there. And his offensive boxing is elite. He's got maybe the best jab in the UFC. He strings combinations off his jab together fantastically. And, he seems pretty durable. So he's been able to win fights like that. But if you actually look at his fights that he's had, let's take his first two fights in the UFC, Fili and Burgos. Now, he wins both those fights. But the Fili fight, they're basically even on strikes the whole fight. Kattar probably wins the fight because he lands a few harder shots and he's moving forward the whole fight. But that's the kind of fight, when you're getting hit as much. I think Fili landed 70 significant strikes in 3 rounds. If one or two big shots in 2 other rounds and Fili wins the fight, the Burgos fight, he knocked Burgos out in the 3rd round, but that fight was razor close, and he was taking serious damage that whole fight. Now he was putting out damage, but again, if Burgos survives to the bell there, he might win that fight. It was a super high variance fight. And, that's basically been the case for him for every fight. You look at, Zabit landed 96 significant strikes against him. Moicano landed 115 in 15 minutes against him. Even Chris Fishgold, who, he knocked out, gave him serious issues early in that fight and actually wobbled him a couple times because, Kattar really doesn't, while I think he has the skill set to be a much more successful defensive fighter, he doesn't really focus on it too much, and he's very willing to get in the pocket and swing with you. And, that's concerning because if Chris Fishgold's not a very good striker, and if he's landing clean overhand rights on you over and over again, that is a bit of a concern for me. And it's especially a concern here. So, breaking down the matchup in and of itself, I do give Kattar an edge because I do think he's a better, more well-rounded striker than Stephens is. But first of all, for Kattar, to cap Kattar at minus 255 or about 73% where he's at right now, you have to assume there's an area of the fight that he can just win absolutely the vast majority of the time. And I just don't see that. So if they engage in just striking exchanges I think everybody expects for 15 minutes, yes, I expect he'll win the majority of them. But the reality is here, Stephens is a much harder puncher than him. And even if Stephens doesn't knock him out, he'll be able to, it's possible he'll just be landing harder, and it's very possible with Stephens' level of power that he wobbles him a time or two and just steals a round or two like that. That's, in a striking fight that's this high variance, that's very possible. And as I've mentioned, Stephens, while his numbers on paper aren't that impressive, he's shown a willingness to keep a high pace in the past when it's been pushed on him. And So if Kattar does bring a high pace, like I expect him to normally will, I'd expect we see a lot of pretty wild exchanges. And, while I think it's fair to assume Kattar's going to win most of those exchanges, and if it goes 15 minutes, he'll probably win, Stephens is more than capable of dinging him or dropping him or even finishing him in those exchanges. So I think even, best case scenario, if you were to say, like nothing else, the best you could cap Kattar at here is like 65%. But then let's take it a layer further. Kattar has shown an absolutely ridiculous susceptibility to leg kicks. I heard someone say this on a podcast the other day, but I believe he's absorbed something like 85% of the leg kicks attempted against him. Moicano absolutely destroyed his left lead leg. Zabit beat it up badly too. He's shown basically he hasn't adapted at all to leg kicks. And that's partially because his style of fighting is boxing based. So he's very heavy on the front leg, and he's never really adjusted to getting it up. And Stephens, on the other side of the coin, is a very strong leg kicker. If you actually go back and watch the fight with Gilbert Melendez, Stephens, by the third round, Melendez basically couldn't walk. Every time he kicked him, he was dropping. And so Stephens, to me, has a path to victory here if he takes it, where if he just starts with leg kicks and just stays there, this is at worst an even money fight, and you probably would even favor Stephens. The problem is, obviously, I don't think you can trust Stephens' fight IQ. I just don't think he has a great one. And so trusting him to go out there and stick to the game plan that's most likely to work, it's just not a reliable outcome. But it's there, and I do think, it's something to keep in mind that Stephens has the ability to, basically hurt Kattar to the legs at will. And if Kattar suddenly isn't throwing as hard back at him because his left leg is dinged up, you can bet that he's going to be in big trouble. And then, the last part of this is Stephens is a pressure fighter, and, so is Burgos. So we've seen Kattar fight pressure fighters in the past, and basically what it turns into is kind of a brawl. That is basically what it turns into. But because of that, I don't expect Kattar, first of all, because we haven't seen it in the tape, but second of all, because of what he's shown against pressure fighters in the past, I don't expect Kattar to really circle out much and look to just keep distance. I expect him to kind of give Stephens the brawl he wants. And, that's a very, very risky proposition because Stephens, like I said, he's probably the hardest hitter at 145. And that guy touches you, as he said in that Conor McGregor press conference, you go to sleep. And so ultimately, I do favor Kattar here because, like I said in the beginning, I think he's the more skilled striker in this spot. But what worries me is, number one, I don't think, even though his raw volume numbers are better, I don't think he's going to be able to just go out there and outpace Stephens for 15 minutes. He could, but I won't be shocked if Stephens can just keep pace with him the whole way. And then, obviously, even though I do think he's significantly better technically than Stephens as a striker, there's just Stephens hits so much harder. And so Stephens, you could see a fight where Stephens lands, say, 60 significant strikes and Kattar lands 100, but Stephens lands 2 big shots that either wobble Kattar or drop him, and just takes 2 rounds that way. That's a very, very realistic outcome for this fight. And so consequently, it's I can't say Kattar wins this fight more than 57, 58% of the time. I think assuming he wins at 73% of the time is I just don't see how you get there personally. I think it's going to be a competitive fight either way. And who knows, maybe Kattar does change his game up and come out there and just stick some moves for 15 minutes and picks him apart. But Kattar's 31 years old and has 24 professional fights under his belt. If he hasn't changed now, to altered his style now, I don't think you can count on him to do it in the future. So consequently, I just think there's a lot of value on Stephens. I view him basically plus 140, plus 145 here, and the line is plus 215. So I think there's a lot of value on Stephens. I think there's value on Stephens KO. And so consequently, I'm picking Jeremy Stephens. My prediction is going to be Stephens by split decision. And yeah, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you disagree, fade me. If you liked it, follow me. If you want to talk, hit me up on Twitter at MMA Fox. And if not, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comment section. I'd love to chat. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye.